What if I told you, most people you meet don't want to be happy. They want to be distracted. They'll lie, smile, and post filtered pictures just to hide the emptiness that truth would expose. But one man, Arthur Schopenhauer, I dared to say it. To know the truth is to suffer. Tonight, we uncover the secret war between truth and illusion. Born in 1788, Arthur Schopenhauer was a German philosopher who saw through the mass of society. While others spoke of progress and love, he studied pain and found wisdom in it. He believed that most people are slaves, not to others, but to their desires. This story isn't about love or success. It's about a man who tried to live by truth and what the world did to him. Let's begin. Berlin, 1801. The city glows with golden light. The smell of roasted bread, the sound of laughter, the rhythmic clip of horses on cobblestone. People rush through the marketplace, bargaining, flirting, gossiping. But amid the motion stands one still figure, a young man, barely 18, with sharp eyes and a silence that unsettles. Arthur Schopenhauer. He walks through the crowd like a ghost in daylight. He watches faces, so animated, yet empty. A woman giggles as she buys flowers. A soldier kisses his lover goodbye. A preacher blesses a merchant counting coins. Arthur's gaze lingers on each. He whispers under his breath, almost like a confession. Why do they smile when they know they'll die? He stops near a fountain where children play, splashing water at each other, their joy unfiltered and wild. For a moment he almost smiles, but then sees an old beggar nearby, coughing, starving, invisible to everyone else. Arthur looks from the children to the beggar, then to the cheerful crowd, and his smile fades. They fear truth, he murmurs. They call it sadness, so they can run from it. The camera slowly pans upward. Berlin's cathedral bells echo. Arthur walks away, disappearing into the mist of early evening. The crowd laughs on, unaware that one of history's darkest philosophers has just begun his walk into solitude. Night falls. A small room glows dimly with candlelight. Papers, ink, and open books cover the desk. The flickering flame trembles each time the window rattles with the wind. Arthur sits alone, hunched over pages of Kant, Plato, and Buddha. His young eyes burn not with ambition, but with hunger, not for wealth or fame, but for truth. He reads aloud quietly. The world is not as it appears to us. It is shaped by the mind itself. Kant's critique of pure reason. He stops, thinks, writes slowly in his notebook. If reality is only a perception, then happiness must also be an illusion. The candle flickers, throwing sharp shadows across the walls. He opens another book, The Teachings of Buddha. He underlines a verse. Desire is the root of suffering. Then he adds his own words below it. Pleasure is just the shadow of pain. His pen scratches fast as if his thoughts are chasing him. The more man desires, the more he becomes a slave. Life is not about being happy. It's about enduring the will that forces us to live. He pauses and stares at the candle flame. It burns brightly, yet slowly kills itself. He smiles faintly. Maybe that's what we are, he says softly. Flames that burn for the pleasure of disappearing. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, Arthur closes his eyes and whispers, let others chase joy. I will chase understanding morning. Arthur's mother, Johanna Schopenhauer, a successful writer, hosts a salon, a gathering of poets, thinkers, and nobles. The house is filled with chatter, laughter, and the smell of tea. Arthur sits quietly at the edge of the room, staring at the floor. A guest asks him jokingly, Arthur, why don't you ever smile? Surely life has some pleasures, Arthur replies without looking up. Pleasures are debts we pay back with pain. Awkward silence. The guests chuckle nervously. His mother rolls her eyes and says with a forced laugh, don't mind him. My son believes the world is a tragedy. Later, when the guests leave, she turns to him, irritated yet concerned. Arthur, you're young. Why fill your head with such darkness? You'll never be happy thinking this way. Arthur looks at her, calm but cold. Then happiness must be the problem, his mother sighs. You think too much. People just want to live. No, he replies quietly. They just want to forget they're living. She shakes her head. You'll never find love or peace if you keep fighting life itself. Arthur looks toward the window, the sun shining over the city that disgusts him. I'm not fighting life, he says softly. I'm unmasking it. For a long moment, neither speaks. Then he picks up his coat. If I must live among lies to be loved, then I'd rather be hated for truth. He leaves the room, the echo of the closing door cutting through the morning chatter. His mother stands still, half angry, half proud, not knowing her son is about to become one of history's loneliest minds. Dusk. Arthur packs a small suitcase, a few books, a notebook, a coat. The room is almost empty now. He takes one last look at his mother's portrait on the wall, then at the candle on his desk, the same one that burned beside his early writings. He writes his final note before leaving. I do not seek comfort. I seek clarity. Let the world chase illusions. I will chase the reason they exist. He places the note beside the candle, opens the door, and steps into the evening mist. A light drizzle begins to fall. He walks through the narrow streets, the sound of his boots echoing softly. The city lights blur through the rain. People hurry past him, holding umbrellas, talking about trivial things. Arthur doesn't look at them. He looks upward, at the endless gray sky. His face is calm, but his eyes are full of storm. The truth, he whispers, is not found in temples or books, but in the silence between thoughts. The camera pans out, Arthur walking away, growing smaller against the vast cityscape. The voiceover deepens. Thus began the journey of a man who refused to lie to himself. A man who would one day write the cruelest, clearest truth about human existence. A man the world would call the philosopher of despair. The rain grows heavier. Thunder rolls in the distance. As the screen darkens, text appears on screen. Pleasure is the shadow of pain. Arthur Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer had just taken his first step away from comfort and toward truth. What he would discover next would change the way we see life itself. Berlin, winter. Snow drifts lazily across the marketplace, melting against the glow of lanterns. The city breathes, alive with motion, greed, and craving. Arthur stands silently by a shop window, watching the dance of human desire unfold before him. A woman argues over a silk dress. A young man counts coins nervously, buying perfume for a girl who won't remember his name. Two merchants yell over prices, while a child begs for bread between them. Arthur's voice drifts over the scene. Desire is a treadmill that never stops. Only the scenery changes. He watches a man proudly ride past in a new carriage, face proud with victory. Hours later, Arthur sees the same man at a cafe, frowning, restless, looking at another man's newer carriage. The moment desire is fed, Arthur writes in his journal, it breeds a larger hunger. Man runs endlessly, not towards satisfaction, but away from emptiness. The snow thickens. Arthur pulls his coat tighter and gazes at the city's glow. Everyone seems to be running, buying, promising, chasing something unseen. He whispers almost sadly, if pleasure is a flame, then desire is the wind that makes it flicker, never letting it rest, never letting it die. He closes his notebook. The streets blur in the snowstorm as the sound of distant laughter fades into white silence. A few weeks later, Arthur is invited to a gathering at a wealthy merchant's new home, a mansion glittering with chandeliers, gold mirrors, and the false perfume of success. Servants rush around, guests gossip, wine spills. Arthur observes quietly, his hands folded behind his back. He overhears the host boast, finally, my own palace. Now I can live in peace. Hours later, Arthur finds the same man alone on the balcony, staring at the dark city below. No music, no laughter left. The host sighs. What is it all for? Even with everything, I feel nothing. Arthur studies him for a moment before replying softly, Because your hunger wasn't for the house. It was for meaning. And mansions can't build that. He returns home that night, drenched by rain, and writes in his notebook, "The will to live is a curse. It keeps us hungry even when we're full." The candlelight trembles. He stares at his reflection in the window. Tired eyes, unshaven, lonely. Yet in that reflection he sees something the others don't. Awareness. Man, he writes again, is not punished for his desires. He is his punishment. He looks outside at the sleeping city, peaceful in its ignorance, and says quietly, "To live is to chase illusions and call them hope." Weeks later, Arthur's mother invites him to another social dinner. Nobles, writers, and artists gathered around long tables. Crystal glasses clink, candles glow, conversation sparkles with arrogance. A poet talks about eternal love. A banker brags about his fortune. A woman praises marriage as the ultimate happiness. Arthur stays silent for a long while, but when one of the guests turns to him and asks, "And you, young Schopenhauer, what do you think of marriage?" He looks up calmly and says, "Marriage is the trap where hope goes to die." A stunned silence fills the room. Then, nervous laughter. Someone tries to joke, "Ah, young men always speak in extremes." Arthur doesn't smile. "Extremes," he says softly, "are all that's left when people lie about the middle." He sips his wine and continues. "People don't marry for love. They marry for comfort, for fear, for the illusion of permanence, and then they spend the rest of their lives decorating their cage." The laughter dies completely. His mother glares at him, furious. Arthur sets down his glass, stands, and says, "Forgive me. I forgot that truth does not pair well with dessert." He leaves the table. The guests whisper. One man mutters, "That boy will go mad." Another replies, "Or worse, he'll make sense." Late night, the rain falls hard. Arthur walks alone through the dark streets, the echo of his mother's words still haunting him. "You'll never be happy thinking this way." He walks past lovers under umbrellas, friends laughing in taverns, children asleep in doorways. He feels the pulse of life, both beautiful and cruel. Stopping beneath a lamppost, he looks at the puddles below, reflections of light trembling in the rain. He whispers, "The truth is not beautiful. It's just real." The music swells, slow piano, low strings. He writes one final note for the night. Every desire, once fulfilled, becomes a new form of pain. The wise man does not destroy desire. He understands its nature and stops worshiping it. He closes his notebook and lifts his gaze to the rain falling endlessly from the black sky. The voiceover deepens as the camera pans outward. Arthur had begun to see the machinery behind life, a universe built on craving, movement, and disappointment. What others called progress, he called the wheel of suffering. And yet, he felt strangely calm. For the first time, he wasn't running, he was watching. The rain turns to snow again. His silhouette disappears into the white blur of the Berlin night. Text fades in on screen. "The will to live is a curse. It keeps us hungry even when we're full." Arthur Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer had now uncovered the mirror of desire, and what he saw terrified him. But his journey wasn't over. Next, he would look deeper into the heart of suffering itself and discover the one truth even the wisest fear to face. The camera opens on a dusty bookstore in Berlin. Arthur's new manuscript, The World as Will and Representation, sits untouched on a wooden shelf. The bookseller yawns, dusting the cover, muttering, "Too heavy, too dark. Nobody reads this kind of thing." The camera pans across rows of other books. Bright covers, romantic stories, and sermons about faith and love. Customers come and go, ignoring Arthur's book entirely. Arthur enters quietly, watching his own work buried under cheap novels. He asks the bookseller, "How many sold?" The man shrugs. "None." Arthur forces a half smile, leaving a coin for the clerk and stepping back into the cold. The narrator's voice cuts through the silence. A world that craves pleasure has no appetite for truth. In a nearby cafe, he overhears a publisher's conversation. People want hope, not despair. They want comfort, not confrontation. Arthur looks out the window, rain tracing lines down the glass like tears. He murmurs, then comfort will be their poison. He writes in his notebook, "The truth frightens those who live from illusion. The dream is safer than waking up." The sound fades. Only rain and pen scratches remain. Days pass. Letters arrive from editors. Rejections, mockery, silence. Arthur's peers tell him to soften his tone, to inspire people, but he refuses. He stands before his desk, surrounded by manuscripts and open books, muttering to himself, "If truth repels them, they deserve lies." He tears one rejection letter apart, tosses it into the fire, and watches the paper curl into ash. His reflection in the window looks older, harder, like someone who's seen too much of the world. He writes furiously in his journal, "Society worships pleasure because it fears reflection, but comfort is decay disguised as peace." The candle flickers. The room grows darker. His mother's words echo faintly from memory. "Arthur, you will never be happy thinking this way." He whispers to himself with a bitter smile, "Then let unhappiness be my teacher." Cut to him walking through empty city streets at night, carriages passing, lights glowing in windows where laughter echoes. He moves alone, the voiceover continuing. While others chased comfort, he hunted truth, even if it meant being devoured by it. Years slip by. Arthur's name becomes a joke in academic circles. The philosopher of misery. In universities, professors mock his pessimism. In salons, socialites giggle about that gloomy Schopenhauer. Newspapers write, "A man so brilliant, yet so blind to joy." Arthur withdraws from society entirely. He moves into a small apartment with no visitors, no wife, no children, only books, candles, and pigeons on his window ledge. Every morning he feeds them carefully. They coo softly, the only living beings that don't expect him to pretend. He walks through the park, watching lovers kiss, old men play chess, and children laugh. The world goes on, blind and blissful. He sits on a bench murmuring, "They call me miserable, but perhaps misery is the price of seeing clearly." At dusk, he watches the sun sink behind the buildings. The light fades, soft and melancholic. He strokes a pigeon gently and says, "You are lucky, little creature. You don't have to explain why you exist." The narrator's voice returns. Society mocked what it could not face. The man who exposed illusion became the loneliest illusion of all. Night again. A storm shakes the windows. Arthur sits at his desk, a single candle lighting his face. Stacks of letters and manuscripts surround him, most unread. He opens his journal and begins to write slowly, deliberately. When the world rejects truth, it deserves pain. Thunder rolls outside. He dips the pen again and continues. Lies are the opium of the masses, sweet, gentle, and deadly. He pauses. The candle burns low, its flame trembling in the draft. He looks into the mirror across the room and speaks softly. "I am not against happiness, only against the lie that it can be permanent." He closes the journal, places it on the shelf, and blows out the candle. The screen goes dark for a moment. Only the sound of rain remains. Then a voiceover whispers through the darkness. Arthur had now lost everything. Fame, love, comfort, even company. Yet in losing it all, he had gained the one thing no one else dared to seek: peace without illusion. The camera pans toward the flickering remains of the candle, the smoke twisting upward like a question mark. Lies are the opium of the masses. Arthur Schopenhauer. They mocked him, called him the philosopher of misery. But what if misery was simply the truth, stripped of perfume? In the next part, Arthur will confront the deepest question of all. Can a man love the world once he sees it for what it really is? Berlin, once filled with laughter and smoke, now smells like fear. The markets are empty, the bells don't ring. People whisper about a mysterious sickness spreading from home to home. Arthur Schopenhauer walks calmly through the deserted streets, his cane tapping against the cobblestones. He watches people cover their faces with scarves, rushing to churches, begging for divine mercy. He murmurs to himself, "They pray now because suffering has reminded them of truth." Pain is the only teacher that speaks all languages. From his window that night, Arthur writes in his diary, "The illusion of progress has died. The world thought it could escape pain. Now pain has come to reclaim its throne. The flicker of his candle reflects in his eyes, tired but calm. For the first time, he feels the city aligning with his philosophy. Outside, the streets are filled with cries. Families burn incense and carry bodies wrapped in white sheets. Arthur stands at his window and watches them. A young woman calls to him, "Sir, please help us. We have no medicine, no food." Arthur closes his book slowly. He answers, "If I lied to you, if I told you it would all be fine, would that help you?" She stares at him in silence, tears falling. He whispers more to himself than to her. They ignored truth when it was gentle. Now it screams, compassion without understanding is sentimentality. To pity the blind is noble. To pretend they see is evil. Arthur's only friend, a quiet musician named Emile, lies pale on the bed. His fingers, once graceful on piano keys, now tremble. Arthur sits beside him. Emile smiles weakly. "I mocked you, Arthur. When you said life is suffering, I thought you were cruel." Arthur takes his hand. "Cruelty is pretending otherwise." Emile coughs up blood, his voice breaking. "I was afraid to face myself." Arthur watches his final breath fade into silence. He whispers to the still air, "Now you are free from the will that tormented you." Peace begins where desire ends. He closes his friend's eyes gently and sits in darkness for hours, hearing only the echo of rain against the window. That night, for the first time in years, Arthur weeps, not for Emile, not for the dead, but for the living, for those still lost in illusions. He writes with trembling hands, "They run from pain, yet pain is the doorway to wisdom. They worship life, yet life itself is their cage." His candle burns low as he continues. When the world rejects truth, it deserves pain. Lies are the opium of the masses. He closes his journal, looks out at the quiet city and says softly, "They laughed at me for seeing the darkness. Now the darkness laughs at them for refusing to see." The scene fades. Arthur sits alone, a faint shadow against the pale light of dawn. The philosopher who warned of suffering now witnesses its truth unfold, not in theory, but in flesh and silence. Years have passed. The plague that once silenced Berlin is now a fading memory, whispered only in the corners of taverns. New music fills the streets, and laughter returns, the same laughter that once mocked truth. Children play in the same alleys where bodies once lay covered in sheets. The people dance again, celebrate again, and, as always, forget again. Arthur walks through the city, his old coat wrapped around him, cane in hand. He watches people spend money on perfumes, parties, and promises of a better future. He mutters to himself, "Man forgets faster than he learns." Suffering teaches him nothing. It only frightens him until the next illusion arrives. He sits by the fountain, watching couples flirt and businessmen boast. His journal lies open on his lap. The world has healed its wounds with paint, not medicine. They call it progress, but it's merely a distraction wearing a smile. He closes the book and walks away as fireworks light the sky, symbols of hope that only blind the eyes that stare too long. One afternoon, a young journalist visits him, curious, ambitious, and naive. He adjusts his tie nervously as he asks, "Mr. Schopenhauer, your writings speak of suffering and futility. Tell me, if life is pain, what's the cure?" Arthur studies him, not unkindly, but with the calm of a man who's seen the same question repeated for centuries. He replies, almost whispering, "There isn't one." The journalist blinks, unsure if he misheard. "No cure?" Arthur pours tea, the sound of it echoing softly. "No cure, only understanding." The wise man does not seek to escape suffering. He learns to see through it. The journalist frowns. "But surely love, or faith, or success," Arthur interrupts gently, "are the colors men use to decorate their chains." The room falls silent. The young man lowers his pen, realizing he has come seeking comfort, but has found a mirror instead. Years pass. Arthur's new book, The World as Will and Representation, is published. At first, few notice. Then slowly, in whispers grow. A professor in England calls him a mind centuries ahead of his time. Students begin quoting his words. Publishers print new editions. The same society that once called him the philosopher of misery now calls him the voice of wisdom. Crowds attend his lectures. His name becomes fashionable among the educated elite. He listens to them praise him and feels nothing. After one lecture, a student rushes up to him and says, "Sir, your work changed my life." Arthur nods politely and replies, "Then it has failed." The boy looks confused. Arthur adds, "If you are comforted by my philosophy, you have misunderstood it." Late one evening, Arthur sits alone in his study, surrounded by stacks of letters, invitations, and reviews praising his genius. He reads a headline aloud: "Schopenhauer, the philosopher who understood life." He laughs quietly. "No, I only refuse to lie about it." He gazes out the window at the lights of the same city that once rejected him. Now it adores him. Now it worships him. He whispers, "They praise me now because I no longer threaten their illusions. They admire the corpse of my rebellion, not its spirit." He dips his pen in ink and writes, "Fame is just the echo of misunderstanding." Outside, thunder rolls in the distance. Arthur blows out the candle and sits in the dark, as if reminding himself that truth is clearest when the light is gone. Years have softened the fire in Arthur's voice, but not the sharpness of his mind. Now an old man, he lives in a small, dimly lit apartment by the river. No wife, no children, no students. Only his loyal dog, Atman, a golden retriever with gentle eyes. He often sits by the window with a blanket around his shoulders, watching Atman sleep beside his feet. He strokes the dog's fur and murmurs, "Animals are honest. They don't pretend to be more than they are. They do not flatter, deceive, or seek meaning. They simply live. And that, perhaps, is wisdom." He throws a small piece of bread into the fire and adds quietly, "Man calls himself superior, yet spends his whole life chasing illusions. The animal without philosophy is closer to peace than the philosopher with all his books." Atman barks softly as if in agreement. Arthur smiles for the first time in days, a small, tired smile that reaches his eyes but not his heart. It's a stormy evening. The wind presses against the window and the candle flickers beside a worn stack of papers. His life's final manuscript. Arthur writes slowly, his handwriting now trembling with age. Each line feels like a farewell to the world that never truly listened. Truth will never be loved, only feared, for it strips man of his comfort, and he mistakes comfort for happiness. The truth is a mirror few dare to look into, for it shows not what we wish to be, but what we are. He pauses, breathing heavily. A faint cough escapes him, but he continues. He dips the pen once more into ink and adds a final line. "And yet, to see even once, even for a moment, is worth a lifetime of blindness." He places the paper aside gently, as though handling a sleeping child. Outside, thunder rolls again, and Atman curls closer to his feet. Arthur leans back in his chair, gazing through the fog glass of the window. Rain falls again, just like it did when he was young, walking through the crowded streets of Berlin. He whispers to himself, "All has changed except human blindness." He remembers his mother's laughter, the publisher's rejection, the crowd's mockery, the brief fame that faded like smoke. He remembers every moment he searched for truth, and how truth rewarded him not with comfort, but with clarity. He looks down at Atman. The dog's breathing is slow and steady, its eyes half closed. Arthur says softly, "You understand life better than they ever did." He watches the raindrops trace crooked lines down the glass, merging into small streams, rivers of reflection. He closes his eyes and, for the first time, he feels peace. Not joy, not sadness, just peace, the silence of understanding. Morning comes. The candle has burned out. The rain has stopped. Arthur sits at his desk, his pen resting in his right hand, his head bowed slightly forward. The papers before him are covered in ink and truth. The kind of truth no one dares to publish. His face is calm, almost serene. Atman sits beside him, silent, as if guarding his master's soul. The window lets in soft golden light, falling across the words of his final note. To see truth and still live kindly. That is enlightenment. The room is still. No crowd, no funeral, no applause. Just the quiet passing of a man who lived without pretending. Outside, the river moves slowly, indifferent, eternal, carrying with it the reflection of the sky. Arthur Schopenhauer is gone, but his words remain, echoing across time, whispering to those brave enough to listen. Decades after Arthur Schopenhauer's death, his name resurfaces in lecture halls and philosophy books. Students gather in dimly lit classrooms, reading his work with a strange mix of awe and unease. A professor writes on the blackboard, "The world as will and representation, 1818. He turns to the class and says, "He was mocked when alive and worshipped when gone." Schopenhauer didn't just describe pain, he exposed the machinery behind human desire. A student raises her hand, her voice trembling. "But he sounds so dark. Didn't he believe happiness was impossible?" The professor smiles faintly. "No, he believed fake happiness was impossible. He taught that we must see through illusion, not escape it." As the lecture ends, the students leave in silence, their phone screens lighting up their faces like modern lanterns. One scrolls through social media, sees the smiling selfies, the luxury ads, the empty affirmations. She whispers Schopenhauer's words under her breath. "Pleasure is just the shadow of pain." For the first time, the world feels quieter, and she understands what he meant by emptiness and abundance. The screen fades to black. A calm, grave voice begins to speak over slow images of modern life. City lights, endless crowds, glowing screens. The man who embraced pain found peace. The world that ran from pain still suffers. We see people rushing through malls, crying in silence, laughing on cue, medicating with distraction. They run from silence, terrified of being alone with their thoughts. The voice continues. He warned us that the pursuit of pleasure without understanding leads to despair. That men who seek happiness without meaning are building castles on sand. Cut to a lone figure sitting by a window, rain falling outside, reminiscent of Schopenhauer himself. Books open, a candle flickers. Arthur's truth was not beautiful. It was brutal, but in its brutality, it freed him. The rain intensifies, washing the city streets clean, as if nature itself were trying to remember something forgotten. The camera slowly zooms in on an old leather-bound book resting on a wooden table. Its pages are yellowed with age, the ink slightly faded. A single line is highlighted in dark ink. "Truth is like medicine. Those who need it most hate it the most." Arthur Schopenhauer. The narrator pauses, then whispers, "He wrote those words for the future." For us, as the camera pans out, we see his quote written on classroom walls, graffiti on city corners, even printed on a digital screen, circulating online among those searching for meaning. His once-forgotten philosophy becomes a mirror for a generation drowning in artificial light. People begin to realize, the more comfort we create, the less alive we feel. The more noise we make, the less we hear ourselves. Schopenhauer's silence becomes louder than modern chaos. The final scene opens with the same sound that began the journey, rain tapping against the window. The world outside is blurred by fog. A candle burns low beside a book titled, "The Wisdom of Suffering." A voiceover speaks, soft, steady, almost fatherly. Face reality. Don't escape it, because the moment you stop running from pain, you stop being its prisoner. The rain slows. The candle flickers out. The screen fades to black. Then one last whisper. Arthur Schopenhauer taught us that truth hurts, but lies kill. So look deeply, even when it burns. If this story opened your eyes, subscribe and share, because truth should never die in silence.